she went full term, and they were 8 pounds each. And so this is a dietitian that practices what she preaches. She said the bigger your twins are, the better off you are with them sleeping and eating. So she was determined to grow them big. She's the dietitian for the Predators and the Titans. And she's one of the, I'm sure your field is growing, but for a while you were the only sports certified nutritionist in the area.
Now there are about 7. Not in the area, but in the state.
In the state. And she will do one-on-one nutritional counseling sessions. I went ahead and paid for her time until about 4 o'clock. We have 1 or 2 slots left. And we're only asking that if you've already been through one, that you give someone else a chance. So anybody interested in, what are our time slots this afternoon, Shelley?
3:30 and
At 4.
4.
Leave it at 4. We got one at 3:30. Show of hands, anybody interested? Vicki? Okay. And the reason we're not drawing for this is we don't want it going on your payroll. We're just making it like a Q&A session available. So you just go in and go into some issues, and the people that have gone through it have really appreciated it. I'm going to let you go ahead and get started.
Great.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you guys for coming out. It looks like this is already on. Okay. Obviously, we're going to talk about fiber and the importance of it. This is not a very sexy topic because when you think fiber, you think going to the bathroom. So, I think it's something that's not discussed very often, and that's unfortunate because it's something that's immensely important for your health and also for your well-being and just feeling good. So we're going to kind of dig into fiber and really talk about why is it so important and how can we incorporate fiber. So when we talk about dietary fiber, I think it's first important that we understand what it is. Most people will kind of get what fiber is. They kind of call it roughage. That's kind of a nickname for it. What they don't realize is that there's really 2 types of fiber, soluble and insoluble. So the soluble type is the type that collects water. It's going to be more broken down compared to an insoluble fiber, so digested a little bit more, if you will, although fiber is really not digested at all, but it's going to break apart more, if that makes sense. So it's going to pull in water with it, and as it goes through your intestines, it's going to bulk up with water and really help that way. So soluble fiber, we're going to see they both have health benefits, which we'll get into, but they're different from insoluble fiber. So both fibers are really important, but soluble types are the gel-like kind of fibers. It's the kind of fiber that you hear about in Cheerios or in oatmeal. That's the soluble kind. They're kinds that if you, for instance, when you're making oatmeal and you pour water in and it absorbs it and it thickens up, there you have it. That's a soluble fiber. That's exactly the property that describes it. It's something that's going to take on water like that and absorb it. Insoluble fiber does not. What it pretty much, here it is, you might see it later, kind of thing. Corn, okay? Anyone that's had babies and changed diapers, you're like, I'm not going to feed my kid corn anymore. What good is it doing? So insoluble fiber, definitely, it's not broken down by your body because you often see it, especially if you didn't chew it up very well. It's identifiable, but it has important properties. So just because sometimes you might see something later and think, well, what good did that do? Here it is. It still does do a lot for your health, and we'll talk about exactly what it does. So that insoluble fiber, and we'll get in greater detail about where it's found, but just as an example, that's the kind of stuff that might be in corn or might be in the stalk of broccoli. So that's called insoluble fiber, and it's stuff that isn't really often just passes through. It's a bulking agent, but both have a lot of important properties. So let's talk about fiber in general and how much you need to get. So we just had the 2015 Dietary Guidelines that were released. Fiber definitely wasn't something that was at the forefront. I think other things in the new guidelines got attention, like the saturated fat and some of the other things in there. But dietary fiber didn't change a whole lot as far as their numbers go. That didn't change at all. They're still the same. So basically, if you want a rough guideline of how much you need, because I know that's kind of a generic amount there, is for about every 1,000 calories you consume, you need 14 grams of fiber. And that's pretty much true for a child as well. But in general, this is kind of a generic amount that you should aim for when looking at total fiber per day. So when we look at the 2015 Dietary Guidelines, it just came out, and that's significant because they haven't been updated since 2010. So it's been 5 years. We just got the new ones, and they're trying to, in those guidelines, look at what's the latest and greatest, the most important things that we need to tell our country they need to focus on in order to stay healthy as far as nutrition goes. And as far as fiber goes, what they said was Americans still aren't reaching their daily fiber needs. In fact, a majority of people, in general, America averages 14 grams total fiber a day. So that's the average fiber intake for Americans every day. So you can see that's less than half if you're a male, and almost half if you're a female. So we're not even getting 50% on average. The majority of us are not even meeting 50% of our daily fiber needs. And that is having an impact on our health, which is what the dietary guidelines tell us. So this is definitely an area that we fall short as a country and as individuals, and it's something that we need to address. And hopefully we'll see through our presentation today that it's easier than you think. So when we look at the health benefits of each type of fiber, so we'll start with the insoluble type of fiber. You can see some of the things up there. You see weight loss, improves bowel-related health problems, and aids in healthy microflora. Let's kind of talk about some of these different ones. As far as weight loss goals, both types of fiber are going to help with weight loss. Some for obvious reasons. Fiber can make you feel more full. Does anyone remember, and maybe you don't want to admit because it might show your age, the cabbage soup diet or the cabbage diet? Yeah, some people are, yeah. You know why it works so well? Anyone? Did anyone try it? Because you feel absolutely full, okay, when you eat it. And you're eating hardly any calories. I mean, you can eat half a head of cabbage for like 30 calories, and you won't want to eat for a while, but your GI system might not like that if you're not accustomed to it. However, fiber, both types, do aid in helping you feel more full. And that, in turn, research shows does help somebody, especially if they're trying to lose weight or manage their weight, be less hungry and therefore consume less calories. So working in the guidelines for weight loss are certainly emphasize including fiber-rich foods. This is more important, including fiber-rich foods, as far as not feeling hungry, than protein. I think protein gets the spotlight. I know protein gets the spotlight a lot in our country. People think it's so important, and it is, and especially important as you get older. But if you're trying to lose weight, you may find that this is a good time to change your approach and focus more on fiber than protein. Chances are you're already getting ample protein in your diet. You might need to focus more on fiber if that's your goal. So as far as bowel-related health problems go, everybody knows in our country that we're seeing an increase in Crohn's disease, we're seeing an increase in celiac disease, diverticulitis, ulcerative colitis, all of those types of bowel disease that maybe you've heard of, I hope you haven't suffered from. But what we find is that in getting your fiber goal, and especially including insoluble fiber in particular, can reduce your risk of getting those bowel-related diseases by 40%. That is extremely significant. So if you or an individual that has it, it's unfortunate, but keep in mind, this is something that, especially if you have young children and you don't want them to have that, you need to focus on making sure they get enough fiber. So it's something that we're seeing an increase of in our country. It's not surprising when we look at how much fiber we average, and what we have found is that fiber intake is directly related to that. And it's something that you can control that can help prevent you from getting those bowel-related diseases. As far as insoluble fiber goes, it certainly helps with the normal bowel-related issues as far as constipation or hemorrhoids or fecal incontinence. That's not a fun thing to talk about, but exist. If any of those apply to you, insoluble fiber is something that's going to really help with that. Let's move on to the last one. When we talk about the microflora, this microflora is something that you're hearing more and more about in the news, the bacteria in your gut. That's what we mean when we talk about microflora. So the bacteria in your gut, if you will, to put it in simple terms, is responsible for about 60% of your immune function. That's very significant. So what it does, your intestines, is they act as a barrier to keep things out, whether it's poisons or bacteria or viruses that maybe that you've consumed or that are traveling through your body. If it's GI, if it's going through your gastrointestinal tract, once it gets to your intestines, the walls of your intestines can prevent you from absorbing those, and you can pass them out. So one thing that's really helpful in people that are keeping healthier gut flora is they're more likely to have a healthier immune system and fight things off. That's very significant. That's also why people who have a compromised intestinal barrier, someone with like ulcerative colitis or etc., they're very high risk for getting sick. So as far as keeping our gut flora healthy, the type of insoluble fiber, the word that you might be more familiar with probiotic. I think a lot of us have heard that word before, probiotics. They're kind of in the news and you hear about it in your yogurt. We hear less about prebiotics. So insoluble fiber is, a lot of the sources of insoluble fiber are what we would call prebiotic. So prebiotic means that even though you don't always break everything down, like we talked about the corn or the broccoli stalks that, or the parts of the bean you might see later, and you're going, what did they do? Well, just having them in your intestines and having them, and this sounds horrid, and this is why nobody likes to talk about this, but having them basically decompose, okay, that's the best way I can put it, is very healthy for your intestines. So as they sit there and rot in your intestines for a little bit, they help grow this type of bacteria that you need. Okay, so probiotics is directly taking the bacteria in. Prebiotic creates that bacteria, so you don't have to take a pill. If you just eat your insoluble fiber, you're naturally going to grow those types of probiotics or bacteria that you want. And that's extremely advantageous. And what we found is foods that are especially helpful for doing that would be like leeks. They're one of the powerhouses for helping you grow the right type of flora. So if, for instance, you went on a antibiotic for whatever reason you had to go on one, which with cold and flu season and people reaching for antibiotics, whether they should or not, it occurs, that wipes out a lot of the flora in your intestines. Something that you can do after that, you can take probiotics, but you also may just look at insoluble fiber and focus on that. And as I said, eating just one leek as part of your dinner, fixing it as part of your dinner, and they're great sauteed, can really dramatically change the gut flora more than any other fruit or vegetable. So it's something that you can think about and do. But insoluble fiber is especially important for creating prebiotics, and they so therefore have a effect on your immune system. So that's another way that it helps keep you healthy. We also are finding, as far as the bacteria in your gut goes, that people who have more of the healthy bacteria, have more of a variety of types of bacteria, they are more likely to be leaner. So it's another way that we're finding that weight loss is included in it. And we're going to see on the next slide also that we're going to talk about diabetes and how fiber helps with that. But as far as from an insoluble standpoint goes, the fact that it does create prebiotics, that also we're finding people who have more of that type of bacteria, healthy variety and more bacteria in their intestines, the healthy type, which comes from eating insoluble fiber, that they're less likely to become insulin resistant. So we're finding we don't exactly understand why this is occurring, but we do know that you're less likely to be overweight and less likely to have insulin resistance if you have more of this healthy type of bacteria. So insoluble fiber has tremendous benefits you may not have imagined, especially you may not have thought it wasn't doing anything, but here you have it. It's doing something, even though you think it just passes through. It's not. It's doing work. So when we look at soluble fiber, it gets, I would say, the lion's share of attention when we're talking about fiber. And we're going to look at a food label here in a minute, and you can talk about how you can tell what's soluble and insoluble from a food label standpoint goes. But as far as soluble fiber goes, it gets the most attention in particular for reducing cholesterol. I think that's how most people have heard about and what they associate with the benefits of fiber. And that is true, and it is really important. So soluble fiber, actually, in addition to pulling in water and binding with water, binds with cholesterol and actually physically pulls it out of your body in your stool. And that's crazy, isn't it? So your body makes 3 times the amount of cholesterol every day before you ever eat anything than you actually need. 3 times the amount. Soluble fiber is especially helpful for helping regulate or get rid of the amount you need so you don't have an excess amount of unhealthy type of cholesterol. And this is why you hear in the commercials about eating the Cheerios and how it can help reduce heart disease. Really what they're indirectly saying is, hey, we're a good source of soluble fiber and we can help pull cholesterol out of your body. And that is true. And that's why they're able to make that claim on their package. As far as controlling blood sugar levels go, you don't have the impact of the carbohydrate. You don't have the insulin spike that you normally get from carbohydrate from fiber. So fiber does not cause an insulin reaction. So it's extremely significant. And let me step back just to say one more thing about heart disease and talking about it. And you can see the goal there to aim for 10 grams a day. Eating it, when I said that it certainly helps with avoiding heart disease, you see if you meet your goal for soluble fiber every day, you see a 40% reduction in your risk for heart disease. So again, we're not talking about 10, 15%. We're talking about huge reductions in modifiable or what we call lifestyle-related diseases. And the one we're talking about here happens to be the #1 killer in our country. So a 40% reduction, this is something within your control and something so achievable. 10 grams of soluble fiber, 10 grams. That's even, well below what your daily need is. You can do this and you can reduce your risk of heart disease 40%. So this is very significant. For every 7 grams more fiber you consume daily over what your average need is, so 25 for women, 30 for men, for every 7 grams more you consume, you see a decrease in your risk for stroke by 7%. So 7 grams equals 7% reduction. So if you have a very high risk in your family, genetically you're predisposed for heart disease, this is a way that you can further lower your risk, something you can control. You can't do anything about your genetics, but you can say, hey, I'm going to really shoot for a high fiber diet so I can really minimize my risk for stroke and heart disease. So as far as diarrhea and loose stools, again, soluble fiber is going to help with that because it's going to pull in some of that excess fluid that may be occurring with loose stools or diarrhea, so that's going to really help with that. As I mentioned, this is not a sexy topic to talk about, but an important one. Irritable bowel syndrome, again, a lot of irritable bowel syndrome has to do with diarrhea and loose stools, so it's not surprising that, again, soluble fiber would be something that's going to really help there as well. Reducing the risk of ulcers, you can read the things on there. Some of the things I don't have on there that it does help with as well is that we see it helps with reducing your risk of kidney stones and gallstones. So if that's also something that you've struggled with, this is another way that you can go about trying to tackle that or avoid it. When we look at managing weight and its contribution to weight, and we talked about feeling full and how it does help you stay full longer and lose weight, we find that it takes about 5 days to 2 weeks for it to kick in. So if you are going to try managing your weight better by focusing on your fiber, know that benefit, it may take about 5 days to 2 weeks before it's going to really kick in. So that's what research shows. So be patient. and stick with it, and you may see that after a couple weeks you find you're eating less calories and you're feeling more satisfied by what you eat. So that's, with most things, consistency is key for sure. Another thing that I want to mention, soluble fiber, again, there were so many up there and I didn't want to make the print really tiny, that it helps with, that's not listed up there, is we're seeing that soluble fiber is directly related as well to helping you avoid cancer and helping decrease your risk of mortality. So we find that, especially from a decreased risk of cancer, I think the obvious is we're seeing colorectal cancer, but we're seeing overall that it may increase your risk of cancer also if it helps you manage your weight and manage your blood sugar. So being overweight is something that's directly related to having a higher risk of cancer, and you may not be aware of that, but it is. So different way to think about avoiding cancer. So on a lot of food labels, you always see fiber listed under carbohydrates. You'll see the total fiber in any food, and this is something that you want to pay attention to, and I'll give you some guidelines on how to look for how much is in there. But you're seeing on some labels now that they actually will further separate that out into soluble and insoluble. Okay, so it's required that all foods have total carbohydrate, sugars, and fiber listed on the food label, but you're seeing now that a lot of food labels are actually separating out how much is soluble and insoluble, and that can be significant. When you're looking at sources in the food we're going to eat, you might find that eating more of one type of the fiber versus the other you might handle better. So I think it's very helpful that more food labels are separating out the types of fiber, especially if you're trying to eat more of one type for health benefits. So from a blood sugar standpoint, and we talked about how fiber doesn't have the impact on your insulin levels that carbohydrate does, even though it is a carbohydrate. You can see an example here, and maybe you're familiar with this. You can take your total amount of carbohydrate and subtract the amount of fiber that is in that, and that's the amount of fiber if you are trying to control your blood sugar, if you're trying to stick with the total number of carbs per day. You would subtract out the fiber because those aren't going to have an impact like other carbohydrates would as far as blood sugar goes. So then you would only have a net impact in this example of 5 grams of carbohydrate making an impact on blood sugar levels or insulin levels. Okay? So let's talk more about where each type of fiber is found. So I sometimes find that stuff I feel people know intrinsically they don't, so I want to be clear and say you need the skins on all those foods that you probably take the skin off of, be it potatoes or maybe fruits you don't even realize. Kiwi, you can eat the skin of that. It's fuzzy, but it's good for you and you digest it. But there's the skin in most fruits and vegetables has a lot of health properties. In addition to having insoluble fiber, they're usually where majority of the vitamin minerals are found. So skins of fruits and vegetables are very important, and they do offer insoluble fiber. And then the soluble fiber, you can see it, of course, is more of the stuff that we talked about that you can tell absorbs water, like beans. That's why you soak them and you cook them. And then a lot of the flesh of fruits and vegetables. In fact, I want to really focus on when we talk now about where to find your fiber, and I have a chart here. If you didn't get a handout when you came in, there's one on the table you can get when you leave, and there's a very in-depth fiber chart on there that kind of talks about the amount of fiber in all sorts of different foods, and then there's a recipe on the back for lentil soup, which of course has a lot of fiber in it. But I pulled this slide up because I think Cheerios get so much attention saying, oh goodness, look how much soluble fiber we have. But I want to draw your attention to comparing a bowl of Cheerios, or a half cup there, which isn't quite a bowl for most of us, let's be real, but compare it to just having a medium apple, and you can see that it's a significantly amount more total fiber in the apple and double the amount of soluble fiber. So even though we think, oh, I need to eat Cheerios or I need to eat oatmeal, okay, and oatmeal's on there as well, and you can see oatmeal down there, and that's what probably gets the spotlight as far as eating soluble fiber and lowering your risk of heart disease. Now you can look at this and go, well, why did they say that? If I just ate an apple, I'd be just as well or better off. Yeah, so it's not that one's necessarily better than the other, but one may have more fiber, and you can see actually there's a lot of foods that have more of that soluble type fiber, more than Cheerios or more than oatmeal. So especially if you don't like either one of those, there's other options. Kay, did you have a question?
Yeah, are you with the avocado? That was really high in vogue. Was that eating it with the skin?
No, that's just the flesh. Avocados are super high in fiber. Who would have thought, right? Because they're mushy. You don't think fiber, but they are very fibrous. Yeah. So that's one that's less obvious, and that's exactly why I put it up there. I think you kind of know, like you think Brussels sprouts, yes, that's fiber, but you don't think about an avocado being very fibrous. But it is. And I put some of the other more commons up there like prunes. Another one I really liked is that the flax seeds up there, because just adding a tablespoon offers a significant, you can see more than Cheerios or more than your apple soluble fiber. And that's something that you can sprinkle and you can mill it up and sprinkle it in your yogurt or on top of your vegetables or on top of your chicken. It has kind of a nutty flavor. But it's a great way if you're trying to increase your soluble fiber. And let me tell you, it's a heck of a lot cheaper than trying to buy Metamucil or some other supplement like that. You can just add some flaxseed. You can even put it in water if you want. If that helps you drink it like the other ones, you can do it. It actually is quite good in tea. Again, it has kind of a nutty flavor. But that's up there just to show you that even though Cheerios or oatmeal's got in the spotlight, there's a lot of other things. So let's talk about how to get more fiber. In particular, I want to really emphasize that you need to ease into it, and that's kind of why that's bolded and in pink. So anytime that you're not if you're currently getting that average 14 grams of fiber and you go, oh, well, I need to get 25 or 30 grams, and you try to go get that tomorrow, you might have some GI issues. Let's be real, all right? And I know HR doesn't want you calling out because you're on the toilet all day. So let's just increase it slowly, all right? Try by increasing it 3 to 5 grams a day. So be sure you ease into it, and your body will thank you for that. The most significant tip on here that's underlined there, and you can see it in green, is meet your produce needs. If there's one reoccurring theme that if you've been part of the City of Hendersonville employees for some time and have heard me speak, then you've heard me emphasize year after year the importance of produce. If you meet your daily produce goal, which for most of us is 1.5 to 2 cups of fruit and 2.5 to 3 cups of vegetables per day, all right? If you meet your daily produce needs, you meet your fiber needs. It's that easy. So if you really are like, how can I simplify this? Meet your produce needs, and you won't have to worry about meeting your fiber needs. It's that simple. So other things, if you want other ways to do it, a lot of us here in the South like beans or legumes. Try to get those 3 times a week. Go meatless. Again, that will help you increase your produce needs, and that's kind of a roundabout way of increasing that fiber. And that works for a lot of people. If they say, I'm going to go meatless 3 times a week, either lunch or dinner, they typically get more fiber. The next recommendation is the one I was talking about on the food label. So when you're looking at food labels and you're trying to think, is this a whole grain product? Is this something that's good? Not all whole grain products are high in fiber. That's a myth. So just because it says whole grain doesn't mean it's a good source of fiber. You need to look on the back, and for about every 100 calories, you want to see greater than or equal to 3 grams of fiber and protein. That's going to be a sign that it's a good source of fiber and protein. And then lastly, I want to emphasize that your fluid intake. So this is especially important if you are ever unfortunate to have to go on painkillers or in the hospital. Constipation is a huge issue. So obviously exercise helps, but you're usually limited if you're on painkillers for some reason. But increasing fiber and increasing fluid, and that's the one people forget. And when you increase fiber, you need to increase fluid also. So that's a really important tip when you increase your fiber. So I have a couple menus here, and I know they're going to make this presentation available to you, but they show just how easy it is to get your fiber. You don't necessarily have to have some big fiber cereal like All Bran or etc. To meet your fiber needs all at once in the morning, and that may not make you feel good. But cereal is something you can certainly have. This example uses shredded wheat and then just put some raisin and banana and skim milk in there. But what you're going to notice by looking at this is you're getting your produce. You're meeting your 2 to 3 cups of vegetables and your 1 to 2 cups of fruit, and that's how you're eating your fiber. Now, in this example, they put 3 tablespoons of beans in. That's not very much. So don't feel like just because the beans are there, that's what's doing it. And then I did another example of an even higher fiber day with 37 grams of fiber in this one. And this one used cereal as well, but again, you can do a lot of other options at breakfast, but they incorporated nuts, which I like. But these are very realistic foods. A lot of people will have a sandwich for lunch. They just might normally put it with chips instead of fruit. So that brings me to the next thing I really want to emphasize, which is swapping things out may be something you need to focus on to really increase your fiber. And these are some good swaps that you can think about. Small things like having the brown rice instead of white, you double the fiber content. I like the one about the cream spinach, swapping it with artichoke hearts. Artichoke hearts are great. Most people want to have it in dip, which, you know, brings fat. But artichoke hearts are super high in fiber. And there's a lot of ways you can incorporate those. You can put them in your mashed potatoes, and they're really great. I mean, plain, they're really great, for sure. Marinated, you can buy them in a jar, and they're still really good and healthy. But small things like we talked about, if you're having a sandwich, having a piece of fruit with it instead of chips. I know that sounds like the healthy thing to do. Well, it is, but it's a really good way to get a significant amount of fiber. A lot of people, I put honey bunches of oats on there because I think so many people eat it and don't realize it doesn't have any nutrition to it. It doesn't. So you eat bran flakes. They're cheap. A lot cheaper than all your other cereals. They're like $2 a box. And they're low calorie and they're high in fiber and they're actually pretty tasty. So making some swaps can really help you, simple swaps, meet your fiber needs there. So as we look at fiber, again, to summarize, focus on produce. That's one of the most powerful things you can do. And that's not just me saying that. That was the main message regarding fiber from the 2015 Dietary Guidelines. As they said, Americans still aren't meeting their fiber needs, and the easiest way for them to do that is to get their produce goal. Simply said, that's what they said as far as all the latest research points to with fiber, and that they need to do it because it can allow them to directly modify or lower their risk of many preventable diseases. Fiber can, and significantly more so than other types of foods that get more of a spotlight. And then avoiding processed foods. Avoiding processed foods is going to help you get the fiber you need, and it's going to be more the fiber you can tolerate. So on that handout that you got, you're going to see I listed some processed foods like the Fiber One bars and things like that that you try to get for fiber. And it shows how much fiber is in them, and you can compare them to eating an apple or an orange. And you can see that you can easily get your fiber eating an apple and orange versus a Fiber One bar. And what you're going to find is your gut is going to thank you. If anyone's eaten a Fiber One bar, you might know you may have some issues with it. And you're less likely to have that just eating an apple and an orange. So avoiding the processed types of fiber, I would really recommend you do that and instead get whole foods in order to get your fiber. All right, so what questions do we have about fiber real quickly? Or other nutrition options? And if it's so this is where you can get any bread you want. I don't care what it's made from, but you got to look at that food label, and for about every 100 calories, you want to see about 3 grams of fiber. So most of them are going to say, if it's pre-sliced bread, a lot of it's going to be 2 slices of bread as a serving, and usually it's around 160 calories. So you can kind of look at it and say, well, I probably need to have at least 5 grams of fiber, in that to make sure it's a good option. So it doesn't matter what type it is. You just got to look at the fiber and protein content, and I do that myself. Mm-hmm.
Portion control is probably an issue for a lot of us in this room. Do you have any fun tips, like how you can kind of control your portions, or just I don't know, just anything that you can?
Yeah, I think that the maybe it's not fun, but using the plate method is the best way, and that's anytime you look at what you eat, half of it should be produce, not more of a quarter of it should be protein, and then not more of a quarter of it or your fistful should be your starch. So whether that's macaroni and cheese, or if it's going to be slices of bread or potatoes or rice, looking at that fist is going to help you with portion control. One tip I think that helps me do that is, one, get smaller plates. Nobody wants to hear that, but it works, and it's something so easy. If you just get a smaller plate, you feel like you're eating more food, but your portions reduce down. Another thing that really helps with that is getting that produce. If you're getting noodles, And I had a lady that came in and she had to be on a 1,200 calorie diet, which is unfortunately a lot of ladies. And she said, so pasta's just out, right? I can never eat it, because she was aiming for 400 calorie dinners. And I said, no, you can have 3/4 or a cup of pasta, which may not sound like a lot, but when you put it in there with a cup of broccoli or 2 or 3 cups of spinach, which is a serving, then it spreads it out and you feel like, gosh, I have this big bowl of noodles, So again, produce, it's not always what you want to hear, but it's going to really help you. You can get a huge portion if you're eating the fruits and vegetables. I mean, you can sit down and eat an entire plate of whatever vegetable, as long as you haven't added a lot of fat to it, and get less than 100 calories. I mean, as far as portion control goes, it's going to fill you up and not give you many calories, and it's going to take the room of your bowl or your plate or whatever you're having. In fact, when I get my cereal even, I put my fruit in first, right? So I put my berries in or my banana in or whatever I'm going to have, because half of every meal should be produce. Then I pour my cereal on top, and guess what? It doesn't leave too much room for my cereal. So I'm naturally getting that 3/4 or that cup that I should have in my cereal. So, produce first, thinking of that when you're planning your dinner, that will help as well. Any other questions?
What about frozen fruit?
So frozen fruit, especially this time of year, any frozen produce is going to be a go-to. In fact, the frozen produce right now, whether it's fruit or vegetables, is going to be probably a better option than what you're going to find in the fresh aisle. And that's because nothing's in season. So fruits and vegetables that you're getting right now in the produce section, a lot of times are coming from Brazil, Mexico, somewhere in South America, or another country, and they're having to be flown in. Whereas you can get fresh Maine blueberries, or you can get whatever from local or better produce that's been picked at peak ripeness is going to taste better and sweeter if it's frozen. And the nutrition is the same and sometimes even better on frozen, believe it or not, than some of the fresh. So frozen's great. And it can be really affordable too, option. The fruit is a kind of expensive, but if you watch for a sale and stock up, the great thing is you can do that because it's frozen. It's not going to go bad. So I really like the frozen fruits and vegetables, and there's so many creative pre-cut options out there. You do need to watch if you're getting seasoning on them, how much sodium's in there, how much fat's in there. If you're getting cream spinach, may not be the best, but they have good cream spinach options. You just got to read your label and check out how many additions are in that. But I would definitely stock your freezer with fruits and vegetables. The other thing I like about it is you can just use a small portion of the bag of frozen and put the rubber band on it, put it back in the freezer, and it's going to last a long time, which is great. So you don't have to, defrost or use the whole thing. Just pour a little out. It's a great option. Any other questions? All right. Thank you guys for coming.